Hello everyone and welcome to Virtual JNUC. Today we're going to be doing an interactive lab on automating incident response with Jamf Pro and Jamf Protect. I'm Kelly Comlin and I will be leading today's session. I'm a security solution specialist here at Jamf, which has me very focused on our security product Jamf Protect. But overall, I'm here as a resource to make sure organizations can be secure with Apple. I'm pausing here for a brief moment for you to review our forward-looking statement. It will also be available for a detailed review if you'd like under Resources. Okay, so for today, the first thing we're going to do is get your VM set up. Then I'm going to go over what exactly is IR or incident response. I'm going to break down the process of everything that's involved with this automation. We're going to do a little bit of a workshop on building out our workflow. I'm going to go over exactly what you need to do to set up Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro. And then finally, we're going to watch the magic happen. So to get everybody set up, I'm going to give everyone a solid 5 minutes to get your VMs opened and get logged in. So if you have any problems or issues, please post it in the chat box below. And all you need to do is go to this web URL you see on the screen. So https:/jamf.it/JNUC 2020 labs. So that's JNUC 2020 LABS. And I'm going to start our 5-minute timer now. All right, we have just about under 2 minutes to get our VMs all set up and logged in. Again, if you're having any issues, please post in the chat box below. Okay, so that's time, and now we're on to our next step. So all you need to do to enroll your VM into Jamf Pro, and if you haven't done so already, is you just need to simply click the script that you see on your desktop. So again, for those who've not done so already, I'm going to give you another 2 minutes to get your device fully enrolled into Jamf Pro. Also, if you're having any issues, please remember to use the chat box below to post your questions. Okay, let's keep moving. And really quick, I just want to say thank you for any of you who've done all these steps really quickly, and this timer length has been a little too long. I just want to ensure that we have enough time to make sure everybody is able to get everything set up on these VMs, because VMs can be kind of tricky sometimes. All right, for our next step, I'm going to need you to open up the applications folder and then find the application labeled Free iPhone, and I'm going to need you to go ahead and click it. Now, hopefully, from what all of you have seen, once you've executed this application, it's actually not giving you a free iPhone. This is an example of what malware can do and how fast it can execute on a machine. Now, this particular sample is not actually that malicious. I mean, we could see how the Windows XP background feels on a Mac. Feels slightly wrong, right? But it's not actually doing anything terrible or bad. But this is just a good visual representation of how quickly malware can be executed on a device and how simple it is to get an end user to open up something that is potentially malicious. So it's not always an application that is giving something for free. Malware can easily be Trojaned into everyday applications. So we could have end users that get sent an application that they're using regularly, but it's claiming to be an updated version, and having them simply download that, authorize it to run on their device, and then now that malware malicious action is being taken place on your organization's Macs. So next up, we need to install Jamf Protect. And to do this, I just need you to open up self-service, and you'll see the Jamf Protect installation either in the featured category, or if you don't see it there, you can install it from the Jamf Protect category. And it's just the green circle icon. It says Jamf Protect Install. And again, just to give everybody enough time to get self-service launched, I'm going to give you another 2 minutes to get Jamf Protect running. Now, really quick, as you can see, I've also included a terminal command of sudo protectctl check-in to get the Jamf Protect agent to check in immediately once you've installed it. Additionally, you could run sudo protectctl info to verify that the Protect agent has done a complete check-in and making sure that it's on the latest version and has the latest signature database. All right, here's your 30-second warning. All right, so now we need to reset our wallpaper. As beautiful as the XP wallpaper is, let's get everything back to normal. So to do this, again, just simply open up self-service, and in the Jamf Protect category, you should see a policy to run that just simply says reset wallpaper. And I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds to complete this. All right, so next up, let's get some details of this application that's run on our device and get some forensic information on exactly what was executed. So the first thing that you can do is any application or process or PKG or DMG, you should be able to right click within that on that process and click Show Package Contents. When you do this, it will give you an extra view so you can see exactly what's added into that application. So as you can see here, for the calculator app, you can see all of the contents, including within that Mac OS directory or just Mac OS folder, the actual executable to launch that calculator. So this is important for our next step because sometimes when you're trying to get binary information from these applications or processes, it's not just within something.app. You actually have to go within the content and find the actual executable to get those binary details. So the two easiest ways to get binary details, at least for me, or what I commonly use, is to do code sign or the SHA-SUM commands within terminal. So for code sign, you can simply just do code sign /dv or code sign tac dv, and then the full path to your file to be able to get that information. Doing the code sign with the verbose edition will give you a ton of information to include the SHA-1 and SHA-256 of that process. That's actually my absolute favorite way to get the binary details off of malware or off of any process or application. But if you are just looking for the SHA-1 or SHA-256 hash information, you can do that second command. So I want to give everybody a couple of minutes to kind of play around, click on some applications, do the show package contents, explore what's there, but also run these commands if you'd like. And one thing to note, when you're doing the code sign command or the SHA-1 or SHA-256 command on an actual Apple application within the application folder, you're actually not going to get anything returned. So you will have to do that on something that's third party or just not native Apple. Okay, I'm going to give you all 2 minutes starting now. All right, 30-second warning before we move on. All right, so I made things a little easier for you and shown you exactly the code sign return from that free iPhone application. Some of you may have done this already, but for those of you who didn't, this is actually what you would see running that command for that application. So looking through all these details, you can see that hash information, but more importantly, we also get the team identifier. So what's really great about this is Jamf Protect has the ability to block processes from any of the binary sources of the hash information or app information, including the team identifier. So this is a great way to block or restrict processes for certain developers. So if there's a developer that makes tools that you do not want in your environment or want to run in your environment, you can simply take the team identifier for that tool or any one of their tools, put that into Jamf Protect, and you'd be able to block it. Now, I know that was a lot, and I'm going to go into a little bit more later on how you can do that exact process with Jamf Protect, and it's all a part of our workflow today. So pausing in the VM for just a moment, I want to give you some details. Now, the first up is what exactly is incident response? And I'm not going to read all of this to you because you guys can do that yourselves. But essentially, incident response is understanding exactly what you want to do as an organization or just simply as a team to respond to a threat or an attack that's happened to you. And when I say an attack, that's a cyber attack. So if you've had malware get installed onto your machine, if you've had ransomware, if you've had somebody do some sort of social engineering attack on one of your end users, incident response is literally just the process or plan that you put in place to handle those attacks and those threats. And with Jamf Protect, what we've done is we've granted you the ability to customize incident response. So you're not just reliant with whatever is out of the box as far as the security tool provides as a method of response, but you can now handle remediation, again, which is a part of incident response, in any way you'd like, essentially, with Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro. So I'm going to dive into that now, exactly how that process works. So first, let me introduce you to Jamf Protect for those of you who are not aware. I'm not going to go through the entire UI or anything like that, but just to give you a glimpse of the main dashboard that you're presented, and then just to cover from a high level some of the features that you're going to get. So first up is compliance auditing. The way that we do this is with our insights reporting. And all our insights is doing is it's going to audit a large number of settings on the Mac and then report the status of those settings back to you within this console. Now, the way our insights is working today is it's largely mapped to the CIS benchmarks, which is a great industry standard for creating a security baseline and following those recommendations of what settings need to be in place on a Mac to make your device and make your security posture as secure as possible. Next, we have our behavioral detections. So this is where Jamf Protect really shines because our behavioral detections are not just reliant on a signature. They're doing analysis on the device while particular events are occurring so you can see if something was necessarily malicious or if it was just a normal activity, maybe acting in a way it shouldn't have. And we'll provide you a ton of details so you can see exactly what's happened and build out a full process of execution and know exactly what users were involved, as well as the binary information for all of those processes involved. We also have the ability to prevent known threats. Now, this is done with our threat prevention feature, and the way that it works is what I explained earlier. So our threat prevention is a signature database of known threats. And whenever there's a signature match from a processor or an app to our signature database, we prevent it from running, so we block it, and we also quarantine that application. So we restrict the user's access from it so they can't try and open it again and again. So we remove access from the end user, and we also prompt them and tell them that they've done something that they shouldn't have and that it's been reported to IT and security. Additionally, with threat prevention, you actually have the ability to restrict software. So using that same functionality of blocking and quarantining from details from the binary information, you can fully restrict software within your environment. So this goes back to what I talked about a moment ago, where you're able to put in the team ID of any application or process and make sure that's blocked across all of your devices. Now, I know the Jamf Pro admins on this are like, well, we already have restricted software as a policy in Jamf Pro, and that's completely right. But it does have its limitations, right? So what's nice about Jamf Protect's custom prevent list is you can restrict software not just by the app ID, but like I said, by the team ID, by the hash information, and it will just quarantine it as well, not just blocking. So you get a little bit added benefit and in a more secure approach to restricting software. And again, with Jamf Protect, we have that custom remediation workflow ability with Jamf Pro. This is such a cool experience, and I mean, it's our main topic of what we're going to be discussing today, and it really just opens up a number of doors on how you want to respond to threats as they show up in your environment, and really kind of exploring the capabilities of what an MDM can do to increase the security of your devices and respond to a cyber attack or a threat on those devices. And then additionally, we have unified logging filters. So this is kind of unique for a security tool. The way that this works is Jamf Protect is actually able to filter out specific events or activity information from the unified logs and then report that directly into your SIEM. So if you have a need to get all of the login and logout information, you're able to do that within the unified logs and then have all of the Jamf Protect data piped into your SIEM. So it's not just unified logs, but it's also all of those behavioral detections, as well as any execution of a known threat where we have blocked and quarantined that. We do report that to you as well. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because most of you are probably very familiar with Jamf Pro, but we're not just talking about Jamf Pro. We're going to talk about Jamf Pro for security and kind of the tools that you can use within here. So the first up is enforcing settings. So a lot of you are already very familiar with this, pushing down password rules, right? Enforcing VPN settings, enforcing corporate Wi-Fi, network settings, that kind of thing. All of that can be done with config profiles, as well as policies with custom scripts and packages. So they're out of the box. Jamf Pro, right, as a management solution is just a great resource to enforce your company or your organization's security requirements to your Mac. So if you are following something like CIS and you're trying to meet those regulated benchmarks, you can enforce those settings down with Jamf Pro. Additionally, you can issue commands. So if you need to remove something from a device, if you need to extract something, I mean, essentially any terminal command that you could run, you can do so through Jamf Pro, either through a policy or some of the Jamf Pro admin settings. Additionally, this one's kind of cool and super nice if you guys don't use it already, but you do have the ability to find and kill processes within the policy payload of files and commands, I believe is what it is. Oh no. But this is awesome because you can have Jamf Pro search for a specific process, and if it finds that process, it can kill it. So this is really helpful when you're doing forensic investigating on your Macs and wanting to see exactly if a process is there, right? And knowing if it is, having Jamf Pro do that for you is very, very helpful. And then last but not least, you can wipe and lock your devices. This is really kind of an extreme method of response, but it is, I mean, essentially the most secure, right? If you've completely wiped and reinstalled the OS, you know that threat is no longer there. Your end user may not be happy, but it's definitely going to help you to ensure you've taken care of any threats that could be lingering on that device. All right, so now let's go into what Jamf Protect is actually detecting. So in this box, I'm covering some of the areas that Jamf Protect is looking for, specifically on events. So I mentioned our behavioral detections. The way that that works is we're monitoring for specific actions taking place within the events you see here. So a file system event, right? We could be looking for a very particular file to be downloaded or just be present on the machine. Process events, any particular process that we had that is known or malicious, we have a behavioral detection for that. Additionally, we have those known threats. So in that center box, right, think of that, that's that signature database of known threats. So known Mac malware, known Mac ransomware, that kind of thing, that sits within our threat prevention database. And additionally, we have those unified logging filters. Now, that's not necessarily a detection, but the way that that does work is once one of those activities that you're filtering for comes through on unified logging and messages, it's pulled out by the Jamf Protect agent and then sent into your SIEM. So let me briefly cover the signature-based detections from a visual standpoint, right? So we have our known threats, or we have that restricted software list that you've created yourself. And the way that this is working is on Catalina or 1015, Apple introduced the endpoint security framework. So the way that our threat prevention works is actually completely reliant on the endpoint security framework. So for those of you who are not aware, threat prevention is required or requires 1015 to work. So it will not work on any OS older than that. So, sorry, again, how this actually is taking place. When a known threat or something that you're restricting tries to open, the endpoint security framework does a brief authorization scan. And the way the Jamf Protect is working is we are monitoring that authorization scan. And if we see a binary match of a processor app trying to execute that is matching our database, we will then block it and then move it to quarantine. So it's a very, very simple process, but mimicking the kind of fundamental practice of an AV solution without the constant scanning that really bogs down the machine and takes a whole lot of the CPU usage and just creates a bad experience for your end users as well as for you as admins managing those devices. So a little more on threat prevention. Within the Jamf Protect console, you're actually able to see any time we make changes to the database or update it, as well as seeing which machines are on the latest versions and what machines are on specific versions. Additionally, within this view of threat prevention is where you're able to do the custom prevent list. So from in here, all you need to do is give it a name, provide the hash or signing information, and then just hit save. And at next check-in, the device will have that updated signatures to the Jamf Protect agent. So we've talked about our signature detections. Let's go into behavioral detections. So the way that this works is the Jamf Protect agent is monitoring for specific actions within these events. Once there is a match, analysis is done, verifying that it is meeting the requirements we have for that particular behavioral detection, or what we call analytics. Once there's a match, there's further enrichment that is done, and then a JSON file is created, and then that JSON file is sent back into the Jamf Protect console or back into your SIEM. So we do allow you the configuration of sending the data to your SIEM so you can have all of that reported into one source, which is really common for a lot of SOCs. Now, within our analytics, these are largely mapped to the MITRE attack framework. So if you're familiar with MITRE, you might recognize some of these categories in here, such as credential access, persistence, right? But we are also monitoring for gatekeeper activity or when MRT is triggered. So you can have that visibility on those native Apple security tools and seeing exactly what they're doing. Now, within our analytics, you have the ability to update how it's communicated. So to keep it simple, within an analytic, we have different classifications of alert or a log. So in the code of Jamf Protect, the data that's collected, there is no difference between an alert or a log. It's just how it's classified by Jamf Protect. So we give you the ability to do any adjustments there. In this section is also where you start that integration between Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro by clicking the option to add to Jamf Pro Smart Group. And then as you can see, there's a text box that's presented that allows you to type in a value. Now, whatever value you put in this text box is actually assigned as an extension attribute to the device. So I'm hoping I'm not losing anybody, but again, I've got some visual help. So the way that the Jamf Protect and Jamf Pro communication happens is we have an analytic detection, or again, the behavioral detection, that then triggers the Jamf Protect agent. If you have that action update configured to add to Jamf Pro Smart Group, whenever that analytic detects, you're going to have three things happen by the Jamf Protect agent. It is going to write an extension attribute of that value you've added into that field. It's going to run a Jamf recon command, and then it is also going to run a custom event trigger for a policy. Once those three things have happened, the Jamf Pro agent is going to come to life. It's going to be able to create a smart group. Well, it's going to be able to use a smart group that's looking for that criteria of that value from that extension attribute. And it's going to be able to respond in near real time from a policy because of that custom event trigger. All right, so let's start our workshop building because we're getting close on time. The remediation workflow we're going to build today is actually the one you saw in the keynote. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking advantage of DEP Notify, which is an open source tool that's used to onboard end users to a Mac. But we're going to take advantage of its open scripting capabilities and use it for remediation. Additionally, we're going to run a couple other scripts with DEP Notify that's going to zip up the malware that's found on the device and move it elsewhere. But what's unique about this whole workflow that we're building is we're actually expanding upon threat prevention. So by default, threat prevention just blocks and quarantines. It doesn't have any extra capabilities beyond that. But adding a simple custom analytic, we can now respond to any threat prevention detection, just like we would do with our analytic detections. So again, I like to give you visuals. The way that this is going to work is we're going to have our malware execute. This will trigger a threat prevention analytic that again will trigger the Jamf Protect agent to write an extension attribute, run a Jamf recon command, and then also run that custom event trigger for a policy. And with those three things, it's going to launch DEP Notify, and then it's going to launch our malware zipping script. So to get things set up in Jamf Protect, we've got three things we need to accomplish. We need to add the hash or the binary information to threat prevention. We need to create a custom analytic, and then we need to add that analytic to the plan. So in Jamf Protect, all we had to do was go in and add in a custom prevent list of the team ID for that malware that we have on our device. So again, back on that VM, that free iPhone application and that exercise we did where we were getting the binary details, any of that information from the hash, again, or the team ID or the app name, you can add in here to that custom prevent list. And using that same functionality of blocking and quarantining, we'll be able to take that over with our custom prevent list. Next, we need to create a custom analytic. So like I said, out of the box, Jamf Protect is just blocking and quarantining anything from that signature database. But with our custom analytics, we're able to take advantage of that same behavioral monitoring and look for anything that may be unique to your organization or just unique that you would like to monitor for. So in Jamf Protect, all you have to do is go to Analytics, create new analytics, provide a name, assign it to a category, which I like to use the known malware for this one because again, it is a known threat and we're using threat prevention. Give it a brief description of what you're looking for, and then we need to choose our sensor type. So for this particular example, this is a file system event that we're monitoring for, and then we need to add in our predicate. So just to kind of give you a pre-warning, custom analytics is kind of an advanced section of Jamf Protect. It's not something we commonly recommend for brand new users of Protect, But the way that our custom analytics work in using NS predicate, it is a great exercise, right, to kind of use this to understand what you can monitor for and how this functionality can be used. So back in our filter for adding in that predicate filter, right, the way that this is working is this is looking for any new file that is added to that path of where Jamf Protect quarantines apps and processes. So to break that predicate down, right, all it's doing is it's monitoring for any new file that's added to that directory. Once a new file is added to that directory, it's going to report it as a log back into Jamf Protect. And then we're going to be able to create response to it because it's got that behavioral detection action included. Now we just need to go in and update our plan so that new analytic is deployed to all of our devices. Now in Jamf Pro, there's 4 things we need to do. We need to enable the ability for Jamf Protect to write an extension attribute to that device. We need to create a smart group looking for that value of that extension attribute. We got a couple policies to make and a couple scripts to add to those policies. So first up is enabling the EA. This part is incredibly simple, and us at Jamf has made this even easier than before. So to create a extension attribute looking for that Jamf Protect value, all you have to do, go to Computer Management, Extension Attributes, New from Template, and then under the Jamf category, you will see this option of Jamf Protect Smart Groups. This already includes the scripts. There's nothing else that you need to adjust. Just go ahead and click it and then hit Save. Now in smart groups, you need to create a new smart group, give it a name. I like to name these with what exactly we're looking for. So if you are setting up multiple remediation workflows with different smart groups, it's easier to keep them organized that way. And then under the criteria, we just need to add that extension attribute, so the Jamf Protect smart groups. We need to assign the operator as like. This is a big one. So this helps to make sure that we're collecting the exact value. So if you are assigning multiple extension attributes for testing or anything like that, we want to make sure we're getting the right one. And then we need to add in that value. So when we created that custom analytic, right, we enabled the actions, add to Jamf Pro Smart Group, and then we used malware as our value. So now anytime a detection that has that action enabled, malware will be written to the device. Now that's the word malware will be written to that device as an extension attribute that can be found by Jamf Pro. All right, so first up, we need to create our policies. So this is an example of a policy that's installing the DEP notify package as well as our scripts to run on this device. So the big key thing to call out here when creating our policies is this same process can be executed any number of ways for any policies. The big things to remember is that custom event trigger. So as you can see at the bottom where it says custom, add a custom event, and then it's just protect all lowercase. Using that same functionality, you can get a policy to respond to a Jamf Protect detection any number of ways just using that. But we're also going to scope this to that smart group that's looking for that value for that particular detection. So when you're creating your policies, the 2 things to remember is that custom event trigger and then also making sure we scope it to that smart group. Now to focus a lot on the scripts. So this is an example of the DEP notify script that we're going to be running. And like I said, DEP notify is traditionally used to onboard users, but it's great because it allows you to customize imaging and messaging and in the buttons that are used, but it also allows you to call up policies within Jamf Pro to run on your devices. So this is where it's super helpful. So as you can see here, I have this calling up two different policies with this as an example, but for today we're actually just going to be running the policy of clearing. So the way that this works is very similar to the Jamf Protect agent actually, where it's just essentially doing Jamf policy, event, and then what that actual custom event trigger is, which is just simply the word clearing. Now that clearing custom event trigger is going to be tied to a policy that is going to call up this script that is going to do some malware zipping. So to break this down for you, the way that this is going to work is this script is going to go to the directory of where Jamf Protect is quarantining apps and processes. It's going to zip up the contents of that directory, give it a date timestamp, and then it's going to move it to the user shared folder so you can extract it. Additionally, this script is going to clear out that quarantined location so you no longer have malware sitting on that device. And once you've extracted it from the user shared folder, that device is cleaned. All right, so let's put all our work into good use. So the things that we're going to be doing is I'm going to have you open up the user shared directory. We're going to reopen that malware. So I'm going to have you rerun that free iPhone app that's now added to our threat prevention and will be blocked and quarantined. And then we're going to watch that follow-on magic of DEP notifying, expanding that possibility of remediation. So to give everybody enough time to execute this, I'm going to give all of you exactly 5 minutes to run through this process. I've also added in the command to open up that user share directory if you were not familiar. Again, if you run into any issues or have any questions, please utilize that chat box below. All right, here's our 2-minute warning. And again, just as a reminder if you've forgotten, in that user shared directory, once DEP notify is done running, that malware zipping script is actually going to be moving that malware sample there. And this is just an example of how you can use any kind of directory to have that malware get sent and extracted off the device. Additionally, that whole script can be modified to just completely delete the malware if you'd like. But I prefer to have it extracted so your security teams can do analysis. So now in summary of what we've done today is we ran some malware, we saw what it can do and how quick it can kind of take over. We did some investigation, right, of that malware, and I showed you how you can get some details to get that implemented into Jamf Protect to protect other devices in your Mac fleet from that particular malware sample. We went through the process of building a workflow and the steps needed to kind of build out remediation. Now, those same steps can be executed a number of ways for any kind of remediation you'd want to use. This particular one was just really unique in showing how you can take advantage of something that's open source and kind of repurpose it to meet your organization's need. And then finally, we tested our remediation workflow. So we went through and tested that workflow that we built. So thank you so much for attending today's lab. I really hope you learned a lot. And in the time remaining, I'm going to be available to you to answer questions in the chat. Now, I do have one favor to ask, and that is that I hope this lab inspired you and helped you to think differently for how you can remediate your Macs. And don't just keep this to yourself. If you're allowed to, share any workflows you create on Jamf Nation, or start discussions on workflow ideas you have, because the options really could be endless in what we could do. And I would love to see the power of Jamf Nation really shake up the way Mac security is handled today.